I'm Laura London, and this is the first of two May 2025 editions of Speaking of Jung. Returning to us today for episode 143 is Jungian analyst and author Leslie Stein in Sydney, Australia. Born and raised on the streets of the Bronx, his path was rather different from other analysts. He attended the State University of New York, where he earned a degree in sociology and psychology and played basketball, and then went on to law school in Toronto, later becoming a law professor, and for 10 years served as a judge. In the mid-1980s, he trained as a Jungian psychoanalyst in Australia and attended the C.G. Jung Institute of New York and started a private practice, but left it behind to pursue his particular specialty of devising legal mechanisms to improve mental health in urban areas. He completed a master's degree in law at Osgoode Hall Law School in Toronto, and thereafter has been a professor at law schools and urban planning schools in Canada, the US, England, Australia, and India. He also practiced law as a senior trial attorney and was retained as a negotiator on complex commercial transactions in Russia, Malaysia, Singapore, Thailand, United Arab Emirates, Pakistan, and London. He has written 5 books on how to make our decaying cities livable. This has resulted in him being sought out as a consultant to the United Nations and governments around the world on managing urban blight, homelessness, the effects of climate change, and the inclusion of mental health in strategic planning. His work on strategic planning for neighborhoods was given an award by the United States Congress of New Urbanism, and he was, among other appointments, invited to be the visiting scholar at the Sabin Center for Climate Change Law at Columbia University and senior fellow for 4 years at the Global Center for Environmental Legal Studies in New York. He is now a member of the Department of the History and Philosophy of Science at the University of Sydney. It was on a trip to India for the UN on the urban planning of Varanasi that his interest in mysticism was awakened, and he then returned full-time to practice as a psychoanalyst, spending long months in India and enrolling at the C.G. Jung Institute of New York to refresh his work. Since then, he has written or edited 6 books on Jungian thought, reflecting that interest, including Working with Mystical Experiences in Psychoanalysis, The Self in Jungian Psychology, which was awarded the prize of Best Theoretical Book of 2022 by the International Association of Jungian Studies, Becoming Whole, Jung's Equation for Realizing God, and his first novel, The Journey of Adam Kadmon. He is also editor and contributor of Eastern Practices and Individuation, Psychedelics and Individuation with Lionel Corbett, as well as Varieties of Nothingness with the physicist Dean Rickles, all published by Chiron Publications. His latest book, The Psychoanalysis of Dr. Seal, a novel, was published by Arcade Publishing in New York, the imprint that first published Samuel Beckett, Kurt Vonnegut, and Mo Yan, who won the Nobel Prize in Literature. The novel was released in New York City this past February. All of this and more are the subjects of our talk today. Please consider helping Speaking of Jung stay on the air by contributing to our tip jar on Patreon for just $5 a month, and you will receive access to all of my notes from the preparation I do for the featured episode of the month, or by making a one-time or recurring donation through PayPal. Donors receive my notes as well. You can find the links in the description box below or by visiting the support page on our website, speakingofjung.com. You can also help our YouTube channel grow by clicking the thumbs up on this video. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to this channel. It's free and it helps us get more exposure. I am also here to remind you of the importance of recording your dreams. Temenos Dream is a revolutionary dream tracking app available for iOS and Android. Now you can record your dreams by speaking into your phone or typing them into the app. Search for myths, legends, and fairy tales related to the themes in your dreams. Use the new advanced AI interpretation with a focus on Jung's work, looking closely at symbols and associations to consider shadow, anima, animus, archetypes, and much more. You can help support Speaking of Jung simply by downloading the app and creating a free account. Unlimited use is available with a premium subscription. Click on the link in the description box below or on our website, speakingofjung.com, where you will find links to everything discussed in this episode in the show notes. This video interview is being recorded on Wednesday, May 14th, 2025, through the magic of StreamYard. Hi, Professor Stein.
Hi, Laura. Nice to see you.
Thank you so much for joining us again. I neglected to mention in the introduction that you were our guest in episode 113. It's been a while, right? It's been about 3 years.
I think just over 2.
Just over 2 years. And we spoke about several of the books that you had at the time. But today, we are here to talk about this. This is your latest novel, and it's a trip. It is a great story. I don't typically read novels. I have a stack of books that I need to get through, and this was, I have to say, there's so much Jungian psychology in this story that at times it didn't feel like a novel, and at times it reminded me of things my analyst would say to me. So let's start at the beginning.
Sure.
How did this novel come to be?
Well, that takes a bit of explaining, which I'll now do.
Yeah.
I've known and still know very arrogant, one-sided, cold-hearted men. In my intense professional life as a lawyer and negotiator especially, I came into contact with many powerful and arrogant men, judges, prime ministers, even 2 presidents, oligarchs, and billionaires, all of whom have their hands on the levers of material life. But aspects of them, such as feelings, relatedness, empathy, are certainly not there. But that's the position you get when you live in a world of rationality. But the idea to write this came about for 2 reasons. The first was when a family member, back in, I think it was 2017, fractured their elbow in New York Central Park. And we went to see a surgeon. And as he came toward us, I was amazed that he was bigger than Arnold Schwarzenegger. He was completely bulked up, as they say, incredibly muscled with a shiny face, and his arms really were popping out of his surgical scrubs. And his first words were how much he was going to charge, which was substantial, but he wouldn't even look at me. He talked as if I didn't exist. As when I asked him questions, I felt like I was sort of crap on his shoes. And the second, having got that picture in my head, the second emerged because my background leads me to see many professional one-sided men who are comfortable seeing someone who's in their profession or was a professional. And they have great difficulty shaking that one-sided position in analysis. And especially as they get older, it's very hard for them to let go. And some keep it up by going in 1 day a week, even in their 90s, to keep up that illusion. I'm not disparaging any of them at all, but I understand that it's very difficult to relinquish the lifetime of power and influence. What appears, someone described it as a drop of honey on the tongue, and to make room for what's irrational. So I admire their courage to come in to seek analysis, and they submerge themselves in unconscious material. But the combination of those 2 things led me to envisage how could psychological change occur in our world with so many one-sided men. Jung very much used to say that there's a lot of perils of being one-sidedness, and psyche will force a man sooner or later to realize other aspects that lie hidden and have been inaccessible. So the novel is what that looks like in psychoanalysis, using a character that is somehow an amalgam of all the hundreds of people I've met. It's a long explanation, but those are the factors that sort of stood behind it.
Well, something that I didn't ask you before we started recording is because I've never done an episode on focused on a novel, is how much of this plot is it okay to give away? Do
Oh,
you, do you know what I mean? Because I want to talk about the book and the story, which is fantastic.
anything but the ending.
Anything but the ending. Okay. So can we start with the cover? The cover
Yeah.
image is, and I'll put it up on the screen in the edited version of the video, is Solomon, help me out here, Trismosan, Splendor Solis,
Yeah.
Alchemical Treatise of Solomon.
Yeah. And what it is it's a 16th century alchemical text which shows the phases of change in alchemy. And one of those changes is the idea that a man has to be boiled. There's somebody pumping up the sort of heat in order to affect any change. And there's a little dove over the man's head, if you'll notice, which is actually his spirit finally being released. And the heating in alchemy is being subjected to intense psychic activity and being able to be at the mercy of these forces that they stir up. So that's what it is.
And the book,
in Adam Kadmon, there was another one from the same book about a man getting knowledge for the first time, coming out of the primordial ooze. It's amazing stuff, the alchemical imagery.
Yes, it sure is. And the book opens with Creatio ex, help me out, Nihilo, creation out of nothing.
Yeah. Because here's this man just going along being his arrogant self. A lot of those situations happened to me, like giving up a lecture next to somebody. They were going to do an hour, I was going to do an hour, and they do an hour and 50 minutes, leaving me 10. So I got the feel of that. And what happens is all of a sudden things change. He gets a dream, and the dream actually starts annoying him in a way. And then he has a patient who turns out to have an awful father, and all of this starts when nothing happened before. He was living a perfectly arrogant, normal life.
So let me just jump in here. We're talking about the main character of the novel, who is a transplant surgeon and one of the top in his field. It takes place in New York City. And I was thinking of you the whole time I was reading this. You and I are both native New Yorkers. I always say it takes one to know one. And so his name is Dr. Seal. And when I saw this name, I thought about how when my husband years and years and years ago was getting his MBA at Washington University in St. Louis, I always have to think twice because I went to the University of Washington in Seattle. He went to Washington University in St. Louis. I was in the stacks and there was, I'm going to put it up on the screen. That's where I learned that the German word for soul was seal. So as soon as I saw this, it made sense to me. So that's who you're referring to, is this Dr. Seal, the main character in the novel, who I was wondering what his life was like before he had this dream. So do you want to talk a little bit about the dream?
Sure.
Or do you want to, I don't know again, if you want to save things for the reader, I totally understand.
Yeah. But I should mention Enoch is his first name.
Yes.
It's very much based on the Book of Enoch.
Yes.
The idea of the first time a man actually interceding on behalf of the divine to sort of fix things. So for various reasons, what happened is the giants came down and mated with angels, came down and they produced a race of giants, and they're getting out of control. So God chose Enoch to actually right that wrong. So he had a dream, and the dream basically was his first intimation of the fish. And the fish, of course, is the sign of Christ, and that which travels in the unconscious, that which travels in the deep ocean. And of course, everywhere in Jung in every culture, it seems, that the water is the symbol for the flowing of material in the unconscious. So he has a dream similar to that. I won't go into the exact details, but that wakes him up. It disturbs him because it's a dream which is irrational. And if anything, Dr. Seal's completely rational.
Mm-hmm. Has this been your experience as an analyst that someone who doesn't have any interest in psychology, had no intentions of ever doing any kind of introspective work, would have a dream that would shake them, rattle them, get their attention to the point where they sought to find out what's this all about?
It happens from time to time. At one point, and I've written about this elsewhere, a man came in and said he had a dream that he was came upon a elevator, and he realized that if he took into the elevator, he'd go back and he'd see his past. And it wouldn't affect him in terms of, he said, the grandfather paradox, but he'd go back and see his past and everything that goes back. And he was really disturbed by that, not being a person who had ever had any kind of intimation that there'd be other forces than the mind. So it happens from time to time. People come with dreams, but soon thereafter, they have, in fact, somebody who bought a copy wrote to me recently and said they had their first Jungian dream in 10 years after reading the novel, which was very much a whole possible upheaval for them as they were getting older. So yeah, that combination happens, but people often have, it's as if, and I'm not talking about the unconscious like a noun, I'm talking those forces within us which are unconscious to us. There reaches a point where sooner or later they're going to disrupt that one-sidedness. It might be at the end of life, it happens for some men, where they get that feeling that comes through. It might be because of a divorce. It might be because of some health issue. And then all those things, it's trying to break through, bring into light all of those things which have been neglected, which are required for balance and for the person to actually fulfill the wants of psyche, which is to bring them closer to wholeness.
And I was also thinking that just because we have dreams like that doesn't mean we're going to pay attention to them, remember them, do anything about it. But he does. I mean, this dream, the themes of this dream are woven throughout the novel, and things happen in his life to get his attention and to break him out of that one-sidedness. Now, is that inevitable too, that when we get so one-sided that the opposite comes to meet us or slap us in the face?
Always. So if we are one-sided, then that other material will eventually find a way to get through. It might not be as dramatic as in the novel, but it could be, people are dissatisfied. They get depressed. Things from their past where they don't feel good about themselves starts coming to the fore, causing them to make changes. They pass all the feeling over to their spouse, who has the person, and we've all seen that. The person has the feeling as the spouse, and she then might have enough of it and push him into something. Or, I feel that it's always going to be that way. It's the coincidence of opposites, as Jung talked about it. We go too far one side, the other side is going to sort of require some way to be dealt with.
You say the one-sided man with no relationship to feelings, he eventually, in the beginning, you introduce another character that really alters the course of his life. And this would be his shadow. You say that this other character is everything I don't want to be or engage with. That the main character says that this other guy, Vogel, is everything I don't want to be or engage with. And that's really who kind of shatters his reality.
Well, we always do this. I mean, all of us project onto people. We don't like that person. That person's dirty or that person's untrustworthy. But these are all aspects, as Jung would put it, of our shadow. And they're projected out. So if you see something which is completely the darkness in you, in other words, you're similar to that person, but don't want to admit it, or you have aspects of that person in us, which we all have, then that's the thing you're going to hate. So you're exactly right. That's what he's doing. He's dealing with his shadow there, his complete opposite. A person who's not arrogant, a person who has no wealth or actually any real agency in the world, but only has one person he loves, which is his son. Because there always has to be an outlet for that feeling. And as I said, it's usually that way in terms of a spouse or a partner and so on. And Jung talked very much about the need for that to be a disruption, a serious disruption. He called it the possibility of an antiadromia, that all of a sudden you move from one way over to the other way. It just forces you into it. But I think you'll ask questions about how he's forced, and then I can talk about it more.
About how he's forced.
Yeah.
So the thing that the main character, Enoch Seal, that he loves the most gets threatened, and that's his profession.
Right. That's it, because when you're one-sided, I mean, you talked about me being a judge. I had that feeling of that, people would run across the street, "Good morning, sir," and I just felt that same drop of honey as the man explained it. All of a sudden your position in society, you fit in really well. You're not threatened by anything because you've got control. I mean, I've known, it's interesting that many of the judges, their children have terrible problems.
Interesting. Yeah.
Because they just actually can't live up to that kind of arrogance and closed-mindedness that comes from having that position in society where you're unassailable. No one can actually do anything to you. We know some people like that politically.
Yes. Also, the children of physicians, of psychiatrists, as well. The main character does wind up in analysis.
He does, on the basis that he thinks it's going to just enhance his ego.
Okay, would you say a little bit more about that? Because I like the line, "Doctors don't make good patients."
Right. Well, it's not their fault in a way, because the whole basis of being a doctor is that, as one doctor once put it to me, we're healing God's imperfection. So therefore, it fits into an archetype. It's as if there's a door which says doctor, and in you go. You open the door and you enter into the full-blown archetypal position. I've been in that situation. And it's pretty hard to think other than you were part of that archetype. It's like you feel like you're blessed because of it. So very much, it's not possible unless the person has something's happened to lose the reputation, or they come in as a couple with a wife who said, "Well, he's never home," and so on, and then they're in the room with me. But and occasionally they just need someone who can appreciate where I come in, what it's like to be a lawyer, and how grueling it is, and terrible it is in terms of the pressure it puts on the family.
Yeah.
But by and large, a dream won't bring a person in. They need to sort of like start to be falling into an abyss, and then they'll come in.
And in the book, the analysts, you say, knew that Enoch, like many bright patients, was at least able to integrate his experience on a thinking level, getting a glimpse of the mysterious workings of the unconscious. But he said very few, he was clear, venture beyond this point. So there was a struggle. Enoch did struggle in analysis, and in fact, the analyst terminated him at one point.
See, as I see it, the situation is that you're so fixed on your conscious position that when stuff arises from the unconscious, it's pretty hard to sort of handle it because it might unseat you. So, for instance, if our Dr. Seal, which isn't the way the book unfolds, but if he actually saw that there was a nasty part of him, which was basically, which comes out later, was basically grotesque and vicious, he wouldn't want to see that at all. So he has a struggle. But some people can understand that there are, on an intellectual basis, as we all can, that there are aspects of ourselves which remain not available to us, unconscious. But what it requires then is a conversation, in a sense, with the unconscious to say, okay, I want more of this. And it reaches a point where I sometimes say to people, it's like a button's in front of you, a big red button. Do you want to press it? And a lot of people go, well, maybe not. I mean, I've got maybe not. What would be the effect of pressing it? Well, could blow up your whole life, but at least you'll become whole as a result of it, as it works. I'm not too sure if I want to do that. So that's actually the test. The process of Jungian psychoanalysis allows, that's why it takes so much time, it allows for the continued understanding that what comes up is benevolent, that it's actually working for your benefit. It's showing you parts of yourself which you've neglected, which take away some of your immediate suffering. And therefore, over time, you begin to believe that it's there. And eventually you begin to see that, well, actually, it's probably more in control than you think. And that's Jung's notion of the self. Because he said this process is supposed to end in realization of the self being the fact that there is actually a balance point between what's very conscious and also what comes from the depths. So that takes a very long time.
Yes.
And a real commitment beyond just saying, that's an interesting dream I had last week. And it requires really being able to surrender to the benevolence of the unconscious or unconscious material and give it the power of sort of working through you fully without you saying, well, it's too hard. I got too much at work at the moment, which people have said. It's disturbing me. And at one point in there, which I've seen happen, that person tries to bring all of that softness, which they had been missing, all of that sort of relatedness and feeling into their work. And that backfires. Because in a world of rationality, no one wants to hear that. Like a doctor who once said, we started a lecture saying, I really get a sense of all of you. I hope you're really feeling well and stuff like that. And somebody raised their hand and said, look, can you get on with the lecture? Nobody's interested in that kind of thing until they themselves have experienced it. So that's the novel's trying to really say, what does it really take for a completely one-sided man, of which we all know some, to actually change, to be in the grip of and appreciate the feeling, relatedness, empathy, the kinds of things which aren't part of the agenda of the material world.
And Dr. Seal goes through some very horrific experiences in this book. I mean, there's some really dark sections of this book that were hard to read, but necessary. And it really made me rethink the judgment that we have on people for experiencing these things, because they are human, they are maybe necessary. Did he bring them all on himself? Did it get him to a better place? So, well, I'm interested in going to let you answer that, but I'm interested in how you writing a book, as you did a book on the self, a book on mystical experiences, is different from writing a novel, because I found this so refreshing, because we learn through stories, right? So this is a story, and you bring in all of these Jungian concepts to illustrate them. Here's an example. That's what I like about it.
Yeah, I mean, that idea started with one of my supervisors in New York, Donald Farrell, who said to me, "Look, the only way to really explain Jung is by story.
Mm,
See, people aren't going to pick up the self in Jungian psychology and sort of say, well, I mean, some people do, but that's not the way in for
right.
themselves." So I've tried to do that in so many ways, and I found that I just love to enter into that world, and I do it in a very controlled manner, so it doesn't become a book. It becomes I just work on it an hour every day,
Okay.
just 1 hour, not 59 minutes or an hour and 1 minute, but exactly 1 hour.
Okay.
And then I leave it. Next day I do another page or another hour. And that way, actually, I can just stay with the feeling of it all, not have to sort of turn into narrative and describing things. So I love doing it. As I mentioned to you before we started, I'm working on another one at the moment. But again, just bit by bit, not really taking it on as writing a book, which is because so many people have that in them to say those things, but they get exhausted by the fact that it's a large project. And if it's a large project, it becomes daunting. So I got this advice from someone who won the Booker Prize, who said to me, the only way to go about this is just a bit a day. Other people sit there nonstop, but I love doing it. It's really, and then things inform me. I'll open up to a page. You know how it works. You open up to a page of something, and there's something you go, oh, right, the character should be like that, and so on. So, but I feel that this form, and Murray Stein does it with his plays, the Eranos play, and others, and the Analyst and the Rabbi, and so on, to try and
Yeah.
bring this into the world.
Mm.
Try to say to people, this is what Jungian analysis is like, which is very different to any other kind of analysis. Not because it's better or worse, it's just different.
Hmm.
And to me, that's why I like doing it so much. And Dr. Seal was, once I met that doctor in New York, I said, yeah, there's got to be a way that a person like that could actually really open up, not by volunteering and saying, I'm just going to go to psychoanalysis, but by being disturbed.
Hmm. I still think it's really interesting how you wrote him as he did enter analysis. I was surprised in the book that he did, and despite his circumstances, and that he was just getting it kind of on a superficial level. I Because I'm very rational, and I thought, oh, okay, yeah, he's getting it on a thinking level and really not committing. And so I was also thinking about how it's hard to talk about this. People read books on Jung, on Jungian psychology, never enter into analysis. I'm thinking, well, how are you applying any of this in your life if you're just understanding it intellectually? Are you living it? I wonder that sometimes with a lot of books and people that I come across, especially on social media, um, that are reading these books. But I'm wondering, has this affected your life?
But it's interesting because if we take the fact, as Jung proposed to us, that there is something which is as he called it, the mover to the moved.
Mm.
So there's something within us. I mean, neurobiology has now said that there's a centering function in the brainstem, um, which is verifying some of the Jung's ideas that there's something that centers us. Just like if we're wounded, we go to bed and we bring ourselves back to our center. So his whole purpose was being able to say, look, this thing is in charge.
Yeah.
So whatever you go through, going to Jungian analysis, not going to Jungian analysis, is actually what it's meant to do. It's like somebody who has a young child who said, well, the baby's not doing this or whatever. I said, well, that's just exactly what's supposed to happen. Because if you think for a moment, if you took that point of view that you're not the doer, that something else is moving you, which is what is the Holy Spirit, the Atman, the Ruach in Islam, the Ruach al-Kodesh, what Ralph Waldo Emerson called the Oversoul, or Borges called the Aleph, that there's something which is in charge, then you can actually, in fact, just look at the whole thing as an adventure. Things are happening. I'm talking to you, might do well, the book, it might not do well. And that's very much the result, I think, of many other paths. Many other paths have the same outcome, because what happens is you do it in different ways. But I think that Jungian psychoanalysis is a Western way to do it and doesn't require any Eastern way to do it. I certainly have tried Eastern stuff, been there with all my heart and soul. But that was sort of part of what I was supposed to do, which really, that's in Varanasi especially, that's what sort of made me think, well, I'm not the doer. In fact, what happened with that in Varanasi is that I went down to the Ghats, the steps. I don't know if I mentioned this before, and I was reading Memories, Dreams, Reflections, and I had just read about Jung's dream about the self, so-called the Liverpool dream. And sitting behind me to my right was a sadhu, all in orange. And he says to me, what are you reading? And I said, oh, it's about the self, He said, oh, you mean the Atman? Which in fact is what Jung spent so much of his life comparing the self to. That drop of the divine, which is in us, which is actually in control and leading us towards where we need to go in this particular lifetime. So if people come, great. And some people come, get nothing out of it. Some people come and change their lives. And for me, I'm not in charge. I'm, just part of the adventure for them. And for Dr. Seal, he was told to go because it was good for his ego. This person would really appreciate you. You'd really like it because you're so smart. So he went along and then submerged himself. And then the soul said, okay, you're in, buddy. Let's get moving.
And you say that Enoch's ego had been relativized. What did you mean by that?
Well, relative to the unconscious, it's not inflated anymore. It had been brought down. Now, Jung very much talked about various factors which are completely disruptive to a man, including the anima.
Yes.
He actually said that the anima, the feminine principle, as it's often referred to, is, quote, life itself. He doesn't say that about any other archetype at all, just the anima, because it has the capacity to really break a man. And that's why the life itself is what actually, like with Odysseus and, with Circe, and that's what leads a man into sort of a complete letting go. He loses his power. So very much Jung applied that to one thing only, life itself. He used the term 70 times, but he only applied it to the anima as being that which is completely disruptive. But I mean by the anima is not the woman, but rather irrationality. And that's what Jung talked about in his when he was 26, he gave a lecture to the Zaphangia group, which was his fraternity. Yeah. And in which he said, I don't think you're really going to like this, but really, we're all too one-sided, he said. And then he had a dream where he killed Siegfried. And it talks about in the Red Book, and Siegfried represented to him complete rationality.
Mm-hmm.
Then he got involved with the fantasies of someone called Miss Miller, and they were completely irrational. And then he began to learn that existed in him and is of equal value or more value than the intellect and the one-sidedness.
So you do get into the concept of the anima in the book, and Dr. Seal encounters it, and to me, it's a huge part of this story.
Yeah.
Do you want to say anything specific about what his experience was, and it along those lines, it made me think of men I know or men in the news, famous men that have that didn't come out the other end, that were done in by this. So would you talk a
Yeah.
little bit about that?
We have to start with the proposition that the feminine principle carries the irrationality. It also carries softness. It carries feeling, carries empathy, which to a one-sided man is the direct opposite. So men are always drawn to it at different stages of what the woman is, but they're constantly, looking at or being women, or this applies to gay men as well. In my work, I found where they then it's youthful and it's softness and the same sort of thing. But it's very much this idea that a man has to find that some way, and he always finds it in the feminine. In the case of heterosexual men, he finds it in the case of feminine.
Mm-hmm.
And it starts to actually break him down because he can't fight against it. Now, the story in the book, I can say, is actually a real story for which I have permission. It's a person.
Okay.
He went through all that. He was a famous worldwide negotiator. Met a woman and blew up everything. And but he didn't come out of it well either. He's in Washington Heights in New York as a paraplegic. But the reality is that a man has to find that somewhere. He has to find the feminine. It doesn't mean that he has to go off and, he can find it in his partner. But whatever it is, he's got to see where it is because he doesn't know where it is in the world. He walks down the street as an arrogant man. He avoids poverty. He avoids homelessness. He goes to work where he's the big boss. And then he gets attracted. And what he's attracted to is non-discriminating in many ways. He might give it in his mind some picture, but what it is his desperate desire for feeling. If a man says to me, I met some woman from Venezuela, and driving me crazy, what should I do? I always say, get in there, go for it. Because you have to really learn about what that is. You have to find it in yourself. And that's, according to Jung, that's the life itself, doing that.
So he has to find it in himself, but does it have to be through her?
Well, he didn't find it through her, in fact, but what it did is it broke. He didn't find it. He found it elsewhere, but it's what broke him. It's what broke him. It's what it made him no longer the big man that he was. Now, every man doesn't have to do that. There are plenty of men who do it without that. But for those men who do it, it often can break them apart. And if they survive it, will allow them to sort of begin to realize, what am I doing here? Like, what am I doing with this person? It had nothing to do with me, really. Because I find that men seek that softness wherever they can, wherever they can. They'll seek it anywhere. They need to find it in some way.
If they don't see it in themselves,
Well,
they don't have
see it in themselves. They don't see it in themselves. It's a rare man who does. Occasionally, I come across one who does, but it's rare. I'm talking about powerful men. or not necessarily powerful, but professional men. I mean, lawyers, doctors, accountants. I've been around, and
Yeah.
I see this. I see this in
Yeah.
the world, and men have to actually somehow find that softness. It's a desperate attempt to find it because they know if they don't find it, then the longing is always there. As Jacques Lacan calls it, there's always a lack. Something's missing. So I had to put that in the book, and luckily it was an exact story, but luckily I got permission from the person to use a lot of it. I had to write it. It wasn't exactly what happened, but
Yeah, so I'm curious if Enoch Seale's wife didn't have the temperament or the disposition, the personality that she had, she's an architect, or I should ask, was it because he didn't find it in her that he had to find it elsewhere?
no, he
Did
initially found it in her. But
initially?
yeah, but he
Okay,
seeks it elsewhere. Now, this is not every powerful man. I'm just giving an example of uh,
sure.
how it does. Some men,
Mhm.
because of their look at what they're doing as lawyers and realize they're missing this, and they take up poetry, and it comes out in other
Right.
ways. But I'm just giving what Jung said is the main way, life itself, that comes in there and knocks over all the bricks and makes the man sort of rebuild himself. So I thought it was appropriate because we're talking about what happens in Jungian psychology.
Yeah.
It's true that again, speaking with heterosexual men, it's always there in men, and it's always that same longing which they can never quite get for that real kind of softness, that deep feeling nature. Because even if they've done all the work, at the end, they still have that lingering. They need more of it. It's the lifeblood. And women, of course, we're not talking about that today, but they need structure and order. And the animus is very important for that. I mean, it was brilliant stuff on Jung's part to actually
Yeah.
recognize it, but he didn't recognize it as the feminine first. He recognized it as irrationality was necessary. And then he looked for the irrationality. And then finally, after he went through all the Miss Miller fantasies, which were quite wild, he said, wait a minute, that's actually me. I'm Miss Miller. Now, how a man who was a conservative man sitting in Switzerland could do
Right.
that means that, again, it's the self, or whatever you want to call it, the Holy Spirit working through him. And he's the one where it goes that way. But it all doesn't have to go that way. So it's not spelling doom. And it's not, that he gets into this and she could stand up with it, other women couldn't. It's basically just the possibility of a man that high up,
Yeah.
which we see are the ones most likely to fall. We see that in the
Yeah.
newspaper every day.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that other men are. The people who don't ever do it sufficiently, who don't have that fall, are Catholics. And that's my life experience. But very interestingly, because there's sort of like a structure around them to deal with it, because they have the Mary, and the idea is that they have that feeling built into the whole thing, and
Mm.
they don't have that sort of desperation. But that's just a generalization. I can't say that's just in my life. The people I know who would never think of blowing themselves up. But remember what she put between them. Remember, what she put between them was something which was danger.
Would she put between who?
Her and Dr. Seale was danger. It was an invitation to go somewhere, which is the same thing as psychoanalysis, to go somewhere which is
Ah,
completely not rational. That's what she offered up to him. And when I asked the person upon which that part is based, I said, well, what made you do this sort of thing? He said, she put something between us, which was my own potential oblivion.
yeah.
Men have to deal, especially Dr. Enoch, as they get older, they have to deal with the oblivion, not because it's a mental thing, but the body actually is worried about itself.
Mm.
And therefore, they get close to oblivion. So at that point, the idea of possible danger and to sort of reignite their feeling, which have all lost, and to be dull and boring, not to be, is available to them in this one place, and they often dive right in. And some are destroyed by it, and others aren't. That's what the whole thing about Odysseus with Circe. The advice, really, of Hermes was you had to go to her. All his men had been turned into pigs, and he gave a magic herb to Odysseus, Moli it was called, and said, you've got to go, you've got to bed her, and you've got to stay with her, because that's the feminine. You haven't done that before you return to Ithaca and Penelope and your previous life. But he had to do that because that was what was required of him. So certainly these are abstract concepts, but that's what I was working with in the novel.
Yeah, and you bring that into the book, that story as well. And something as we start to wrap up here, a big question that Enoch Seal needs to consider is, why did this happen? And he has asked that. His analyst tells him, a part of you created this situation, all the situations. They didn't just happen. You conjured this woman and the other things that happened to you. And that's the power of the forces of the unconscious to give you what you need.
You got it. That's exactly it.
Mm-hmm. and then, mm-hmm.
It's such a good position to be in, because if you actually say, that's true, then how does life change? It changes and makes everything interesting. The need to suffer isn't there because it's not your doing, so all of a sudden you got sort of a pain in the side. Well, it's all part of it, it's all according to this, according to Jung. It's all part of it. The self is the mover to the moved. It moves you. So he's actually, if he learns that, then full compassion can come out, because then he's doing the work of the self, whatever comes to him.
Yeah, and you mention this is the analyst in this book is maybe you talking. A shift must occur, as Jung put it, from I live to I am lived. And that depends on consenting to the journey so that shift will occur. Very, very interesting, this story. And we don't want to give away the ending. So before we wrap up, are there any other aspects of this novel that you want to touch on today?
I think it came to me that it was a good time to write it, because we live in a time of one-sided men doing whatever they want.
Yeah.
And us as playthings. No matter what political interests you have, we're still subject to these men. They're the ones in charge everywhere, except for the European Union. They're the ones who are sort of affecting our lives. So I really wondered in this time, is it going to always be that way? Or is there some way that men can change? But that very much, that question is really the subject of my next novel.
Okay.
So we'll talk again in a couple of years.
Yeah, I would like that. Another subject that comes into the novel is psychedelics. And we hadn't spoken since the book that you edited on psychedelics. I did do an episode, yes, with the Jungian analyst Linda Carter, who contributed to that book. And then I attended virtually the conference that was associated with the book launch. That was in December of 2023. So you do bring in psychedelics in this book, and you will be speaking at the upcoming IAAP Congress, which will take place in August in Zurich in honor, I believe, of the 150th birthday of Carl Jung. Would you tell us a little bit about the presentation you'll be giving?
Sure. So what happened at the end of that conference? Being online, you wouldn't have been participating in it.
Right.
We broke up into very small groups. There were a lot of people there, all of whom were involved with psychedelics in some way. And we broke up into small groups and we asked individual questions to get a consensus. Like, for instance, should a Jungian analyst administer the drug? What's the role of a Jungian analyst when somebody's about to have a psychedelic experience? What is in fact the way in which we should be able to interpret these things afterwards? Because there's so much different from matters that come just out of the unconscious. As one of the speakers said, they come from the psychoid region, which is a region which we can't access in analysis. So I'm giving a paper, hopefully with Lionel Corbett, about the consensus and how we reach the consensus, also bringing it up to date with all the recent literature.
Okay.
And there's so much recent literature,
Yeah.
There's 450 active trials going on at the moment.
Really?
Psychedelics. And there are 3,000 articles which have been written since the 20s. So it's an evolving area, but nobody's exactly quite sure where Jungian analysis fits into that. And that's my role, to give that paper.
I'm going to be doing an upcoming episode with another contributor to the book, Nancy Swift-Ferlotti, who will be returning to the podcast to discuss her research on psychedelics. It's fascinating, and we're not taking a stand either way. We're discovering and learning about this topic because it's very big right now.
Well, she's a very good choice because her psychedelic experiences herself had a major impact on her life.
Yeah, she presented at that conference, and I did hear her talk. So she'll be joining me to discuss that.
Excellent. Yeah.
I also want to mention that about this novel. I can't get over it. I read it twice. That there are parts of it that are actually funny, that I laughed out loud. So you're a great storyteller, and
Thanks.
That really comes through. So, did you tell us the topic of your next novel, or do you want to keep that to yourself for now?
Well, no, I'm happy to tell you the title, but it's in the works. It's called Stupid Men.
Stupid Men.
Yeah. I don't think we're going to have any trouble understanding that one.
Not here.
And I appreciate you taking the novel and putting it out there.
Yeah.
Because, you're the intermediary between all of us running around in a circle called Jungians with our own theory and the world. And I really value that. And that's, and being able to bring this people, and I hope people enjoy reading it. I've had a lot of comments so far that people are really getting into it. I think for me, it's just really a pleasure and an honor. So thank you so much for that.
Well, thank you. Thank you for joining me here today. I did post some quotes from the book on Twitter and on Instagram, and I will continue to do so. That's why with these episodes, they're involved. I do all the work. I don't have an assistant doing things because I want to do it. And I like to immerse myself in the book, in the material, in my guest's background, in their life. And that's why when listeners suggest guests to me, I'm not interested. This has to come from my own interests. And also, I have to like the book. I have to like the material, because I'm not going to get on here and talk about what a great book it is if I don't think it is, because I did that once and I'm not going to do that again. So I really, really, really enjoyed this book. It really taught me that we do learn through storytelling. That's how we get it, because then I can go back and, oh yeah, remember when Dr. Seal? Okay. Instead of we need textbooks, but this really gets you to get it. Do you know what I mean?
I'm thrilled to hear it.
Thank you so much for joining us. Speaking of Jung is not just a podcast, it is also a website. Please visit speakingofjung.com, where you will find extensive information on the life and work of C.G. Jung, show notes and audio downloads for all of our 165 episodes, a comprehensive books page, a blog, and now a monthly email newsletter, which you can sign up for at the bottom of our front page. All of our episodes are also available on YouTube podcasts, which you can access by subscribing to this channel, Jungian Laura. It's free. Just click the subscribe button below. I created Speaking of Jung almost 10 years ago. This year is our 10th anniversary, and all of our content is still free to access, but it is not free to produce. Please consider contributing to our tip jar on Patreon for just $5 a month, or visit the support page at speakingofjung.com/support for links on all the ways you can help keep this podcast and our website alive. So with special thanks to Patricia Preissner, to Arcade Publishing, and to each and every one of our Patreon members and donors, I am Laura London, and you've been watching the retrial of Speaking of Jung.